If you're an aspiring author working on your very first book, I bet you've got one lingering, nagging doubt. Who is going to read this book? You are not alone. I talk to authors every single day, and this is a fear that creeps in for every single author I have ever worked with. Just the fear that they are not going to reach their audience. Well, if this is a concern that you have too, today's episode is for you. I want to talk today about what we mean by platform, how you can start building your platform, and what a platform is going to do for your book sales and the general reach of your message. I'm Dr. Amanda Nell Edgar, the managing editor of Page and Podium Press, and I'm so excited to talk to you today about platforms. If you're an aspiring author who's had that word platform circling around in your brain, nagging at you, probably you heard that either from an agent or an editor, or someone who was trying to help you get an agent or an editor. Maybe a book coach, maybe you were Googling. But let's demystify what we mean by platform. It's not nearly as complicated as folks tend to think, nor is it as narrow. So let's start by talking about what we do not mean when we say platform. We don't mean social media followers. Now, that's not to say that you won't ever run into an agent or an editor who says platform but actually means social media followers. But what I do mean is that social media followers alone do not guarantee that your book will sell. I pick on Justin Timberlake a lot. It is with all the love in my heart. Justin Timberlake is a really great example of this. So at the time that Justin Timberlake launched his book, he had around 53 million followers on Instagram. That's so many followers. Now, we might expect, if you are in business, you've maybe looked at the typical conversion rates for different types of launches. And typically with just an email launch, where you're just sending a series of emails, letting your followers know that you have a product or a service available, in this case, a book, with an email launch or a social media launch, we might expect like a 1 to 2% conversion rate. That would be a lot of books for Justin Timberlake, right? Minimum, we're thinking 500,000. In 3 years, his book only sold 100,000. Now, those are respectable numbers for many, many aspiring authors. So I don't want to shame 100,000 books sold. But what I do want to point out is that Justin Timberlake's following was huge. It didn't translate to book sales. And that is the thing you've got to keep in mind when you're trying to differentiate what is a platform from what is not a platform. Social media followers alone are not going to signal the book sales that your agent or your editor or you want to see. That's because what you actually need when we actually talk about platform, what we mean are engaged audiences. Engaged audiences. So that can be a social media audience, but a follower is not an engaged audience member, right? Followers might not even see your content. An engaged audience is somebody who is interested in things that you have to say, who shows that interest by engaging with you, either a comment or a reaction, or sometimes an email or other DM or personal communication. An engaged audience will also show their engagement by supporting your activities. They want more from you, right? And for most really, truly engaged audiences, $20 or $30 for a book is really a small price to pay for another piece of what you have to say, for more info on your message, on your story, whatever it is you're known for. Followers alone won't do it. And I sometimes hear from authors who talk about that they have found places where you can buy followers. Do not do this. First of all, you're likely to get shut down. Second of all, your agent or editor can see right through it. And third of all, it defeats the purpose. The platform is not your enemy. A platform is absolutely something that you need to make your book successful. Okay, so the thing that I know everyone wants to actually talk about. How do you get a platform? If you don't have an established audience, how do you begin to build? Well, I want to talk about a handful of ways that you can start, depending on what you have access to and what your book's purpose is. Now, one thing you'll notice through all of these examples I'm going to share is that all of these have to do with a personal connection. That's right. Even though we are in this highly automated AI tech world, personal connections still rule the day. It is still going to be the people that you know and the relationships you can create that are going to help you build that platform in a way that's really fulfilling to you. And as we'll talk about later in this video, that are actually going to make your book even better. So the first of these is particularly targeted at anyone who is active in their local community or who is writing to a particular group that you are a part of. The first place to look for platform building are organizations that you are a part of. Are you, for example, a member of the American Psychological Association? Are you a member of the National Communication Association? Are you a member of any kind of professional organization that exists to serve members in a particular career or interest field? That is a great place to start, particularly if your book deals with a subject that they might be interested in. Are you a member of an alumni organization? Did you graduate from a large college or university? Some of these alumni groups reach millions of people with their blasts, their email blasts, their magazines that they send out, events. And then last but not least, are you active and engaged in your local or state community? I know one author who was actively networking as part of her consulting business. She happened to be in a circle with some folks from the Kansas Chamber of Commerce. And when she brought up her book, hot tip, bring up your book all the time, someone actually asked for a little bit more information. She later learned that that person was one of the leaders in the Kansas Chamber of Commerce. And as they were putting together the program for the Kansas Women in Business Conference, they asked if she'd jump on a panel. What an excellent, easy way to share your expertise in a way that's going to bring people into your readership. Build your platform. Now, if you are not a person that's super comfortable speaking, or you just don't really have time in your schedule to do a lot of speaking appearances, you don't necessarily have to do something like a keynote speech or, as she did, a panel presentation. You might instead choose to pitch a guest post or article. And in fact, this is a great way to dip your toe into the water. One of the things that I always suggest our authors do is make a list of 15 to 20 topics that you could talk about, either from an expert position because of the credibility of your book, or because you are just passionate about that topic. Put that list together, and that is essentially a list of guest posts that you could offer to make. You could certainly offer, as in the last example, to make those guest posts for, say, an alumni magazine. But the other thing you can think about with a guest post is what other professionals or speakers or thought leaders in your general area also talk about the things you talk about. Now, I know it's really tempting to think of those other professionals as your competitors. I am of the mind that we are all wanting to do the same thing. We all want to help people. So usually people who have active blogs or active online magazines or articles are so eager to bring in other perspectives, not only to help their audience, but because if you are a content creator, you know it can get really exhausting to always be thinking of new ideas. If you can take that list you made of 15 to 20 things you could talk about, pull a couple of those, email the person that has the blog, ask if you can write a guest post. You aren't going to land all of these, but if you send out 10, I'll bet you get 1 or 2 yeses. So if you can start guest posting, you're going to start to get your name out in this area, and you're going to start to get followers who are, again, part of that platform. They're going to see what you have to say. If they are your reader, they're going to connect with your voice. And you have got them then for the next step, which is your book launch. The third thing that you might want to do similarly is to think about podcast interviews you might want to do. So again, this is going to take a lot of trial and error, a lot of pitching. You're going to actually put your name out a lot more times than you actually get interviewed. But the great news is, even before your book is published, having a book in press or in progress is a great way to establish your credibility. So just like you made that list of 15 to 20 things you could talk about or write about, you've got that list for your podcast interviews. Now you can start going online and researching which podcasters, one, do interviews, and two, are interested in the same types of topics that you can talk about with authority. Those are the people you want to pitch. Now, before you just start emailing them, what I would do is make your list and now go ask your network, everybody that you're engaged with on social media. Maybe send out an email blast to everybody that you have worked with, either professionally, also your personal connections, and ask whether anyone has connections to these podcasters. It's not going to be 100% of the time, but in many, many cases, if you can get a warm introduction, if you have a mutual friend, a mutual contact who can introduce you to that podcaster, it's going to be so much easier to get that spot than if you just send a cold email. I will tell you, I have had authors that I've worked with that were able to snowball podcast interviews from just a couple into where they started getting invitations rather than having to reach out. Once you start making the rounds, if your topic area is really clearly defined, other people are going to want a part of that, right? You're going to start being invited to other podcasts, and you need to do a lot of podcasts to get a following. But again, if you are good on camera or good on audio, you're going to connect with the readers that need you. That is going to help build your platform in a way that is going to be much, much more effective for getting engagement and book sales. Okay, so the next thing that I want you to think about, and this is often something that gets overlooked because I think we tend to think we want the really lofty interviews or the really special authoritative appearances. But I'll tell you what, if you can get your local community, the people you interact with all the time, if you can get them on board, they will buy your book. You're going to have a much, much higher sales rate among people who actually know you and have known you for some time than you will among strangers. That is just the way it works. So think about your church, any kind of school clubs that you are a part of. If if your high school class is still in touch, that's a great place to reach out. Are you a member of Rotary? Are you a member of Knights of Columbus? What are the local groups that you attend their networking sessions and you are engaged and involved? I bring this one up because this is a great place to get your feet wet when it comes to keynote speaking. A lot of times people want to jump straight to the keynote, which I get, they pay really well. But if you don't have any evidence that you can do that, it's going to be not only really hard to get someone to bring you on as a keynote speaker, it's going to be really nerve-wracking for you. It's just so scary to think about standing up in front of people if you have never done that before. You know where it's way less scary? When you know the people. So if you have groups that you're involved in, again, from your church to maybe your local chamber of commerce, this is a great place to start building your chops as a speaker. You made that list, you got 15 to 20 things. What do you think those folks would be involved in? Pick a topic off that list. You can start to either work with a coach, we do that in my business, or you can work with friends if you've got somebody you know that does speaking stuff to help build your speech so that you can start getting a little bit more confident, a little bit more comfortable giving that speech. And here's the bonus tip. You've got to get somebody to take pictures. Video, even better, because every single time you're in front of an audience, you are demonstrating that you know how to do that. Nobody wants to bring a speaker into their organization who's going to crash and burn. And I think we've all been to these presentations where we felt so embarrassed for the person because it was so clear they weren't prepared or they got really, really freaked out. if you can build your skills and build your stamina, you're going to have such an easier time with really all of these other platform building strategies. So your local Rotary or your church group, those can be great places to start. And then, even though I know we poked a little fun at Justin Timberlake at the beginning of this episode, I certainly don't want to dismiss social media. But when you're thinking of building your platform on social media, I want to add one huge caveat. You need to think about your audience. So let's say you've got a book that you're pitching on financial stability after retirement, such an important evergreen topic. I don't know if TikTok's the place to do that. TikTok is great. We know we love book talk, particularly YA fiction does so well on book talk. Genre fiction does really well, fantasy and romance. TikTok even does have followings for things like business or self-help lifestyle type of followings. But you know what TikTok doesn't typically have? Retirees. That's not to say there aren't any, but retirees are going to tend to hang out either on LinkedIn if they had an established presence before retirement, or a lot of retirees are on Facebook. Facebook can be a really great place to spread the word. I want to say, if you want people in your Facebook circle, you're going to need to offer them something that's useful. So this means consistent posting, and posting that doesn't just say over and over, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book. This has to be posts that are actually going to be useful, that give people just a little taste of what they're going to get in your book. And you're probably on Facebook, on Instagram, you're going to have to ask people that you know to invite their friends or help you bring in your audience. But I'll tell you what, if you can get a Facebook audience that's really interested in your perspective on your topic, they are really very loyal. Facebook is one of the most established social media platforms, one of the oldest at this point. And if you can get people on there, that is a really great way to build trust and connection with the people who you want to buy and read your book. All right. So to recap, we have a handful of places that you can start thinking about building your readership and establishing your platform. You can think about organizations you belong to. You can think about sites, websites, blogs that have similar audiences to yours. You can think about podcast interviews, again, where your audience and the topic overlaps. You can, of course, think about all of the clubs that you are engaged with and part of that you see every single week. And of course, you can also think about social media. Now, before we wrap up this episode, I want to add one last bonus tip, and that is just to give you some clarity. A lot of times people think they need to keep their book a secret until it actually launches. That is a terrible idea. In fact, the second that you really start making progress on your book, you should talk about it as much as you can. Talk about it everywhere. Talk about it all the time. Anytime you have any kind of an entry point into bringing up your book, you should do it. And I have seen that over and over with authors that this helps them get their foot in the door on their very first platform building example. And I'll give you, as an example, my own book. So I have a forthcoming book. It won't be out for a year. I traditionally published. We've got to post on this. It takes a long time. But when my co-author and I first started writing our book, we talked about it all the time. And our very first podcast interview was an invited interview. Now, we were writing about Black Lives Matter in the summer of 2020. We were really the first authors to think about writing about that particular moment in Black Lives Matter history. And we'd written about Black Lives Matter before. Those are all things that had actually already begun to establish our platform. So take that with a grain of salt. But if we had not talked about that book and talked about the work we were doing, how we were kind of shaping the ideas, the different organizations we'd kind of brought on as partners, if we hadn't talked about that, we would never have gotten that interview. We didn't have to do anything for it. Literally, we showed up, we talked about the things that we were experts in, that we knew a lot about. We shared stories of the people that shared with us for the book's content. And it was a great interview. We got a lot of buzz. We got a lot of people reaching out afterwards. And in fact, we continued to get interviews because we'd been on that interview. So the more you can talk about your book up front, the better. And this helps with all kinds of things. We also had an author who she was holding back. I said, why don't you post on your social media? Let people know we've got this book going. She got offers of agent representation from that post. I laughed because I loved it so much. It was so fun to see that post blow up. Talk about your book everywhere you can, even when it's not out yet. All right, so as you are working on building your platform, I know that you are going to find it so valuable. You will find that you get feedback from your readers when there's still time to adjust or, add in elements of content. You are going to feel so encouraged and uplifted because you've got people who want to read this book that you are working on so hard. And you are going to feel much less alone. The writing process can feel so lonely. And if you don't have a writing partner or a coach, I highly recommend that you find one. But if that's not in the bag for you, an engaged following can really do wonders for increasing your confidence, increasing your self-esteem. All right, I hope that you will like and subscribe. You are not going to want to miss the other episodes in our series on publishing. We are talking about all of the questions that I hear over and over and over from aspiring first-time authors, and now is your chance to get all the inside information from an industry expert. So I hope you'll reach out if you've got questions, if you want to talk about the potential to work together on your book or have your book published by Page and Podium Press. And otherwise, I will talk to y'all soon. Happy writing.